Welcome to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas. I am joined by my co-host, Shahnavaz Makhani. Shahnavaz, before I even get into the topics, we do have to shout it out. How do you feel? Well, we have a game tonight with the Mavs, but how do you feel about the World Series, man?
I'm excited, man. I didn't think we'd be here. This is especially, beating the Astros and getting here with our bad bullpen. It's just awesome. First time in 12 years, the Rangers are back in the World Series. It's a great time for Dallas sports right now. You got the Mavs on, obviously. Cowboys are playing. Stars look really good.
Yes.
Rangers in the World Series. I think this is. I saw something. I think this is the first Sunday where the Stars, the Mavericks, the Rangers, and the Cowboys will all play this late into the year.
You feel like there's
something like weird.
So there's like a resurgence in Dallas Fort Worth sports. Is that what you're telling me?
Maybe, or we're just a team of destiny, man. Who knows?
Cross fingers.
Fingers crossed, man.
Okay. All right. Well, the reason you are listening right now is for the Dallas Mavericks, but we had to give the Texas Rangers a shout out. So on this episode, we will be talking about the first game that the Mavericks played against the Spurs, just some of the highlights that we saw, and then also preview tonight, the home opener against the Nets. So the topics on this episode will be Luka and Kyrie in the fourth quarter, that chemistry between the two, and then Grant Williams, his Mavericks debut, and then also Dereck Lively's rookie debut in the game where everyone came to see Wemby, that actually left impressed with Dereck Lively. So Shahnavaz, first, let's just start with Luka and Kyrie. Last season, there were some disconnects and the chemistry was off. He was kind of thrown into the fire with the Mavericks, and they were just like, Luka and Kyrie, figure out, go be, playoff contender and go win games. But obviously a training camp and then just the overseas preseason really helped the dynamic between the two, not only them, but the whole team within just the chemistry alone. So what was your thoughts watching the game and watching Luka and Kyrie go back and forth in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, it's game one, right? But I think you saw a lot of what they worked on, in training camp, right? Like we talked about this we've talked about this a lot, and even over the summer, it was kind of like, looking back to last year when Kyrie joined the team, and you could clearly tell there wasn't the chemistry there, right? There wasn't, they would kind of both be on the same side of, of the key, or, they didn't really do any dribble handoffs. Yeah, like literally they're playing hot potato. You said it perfectly. Like it felt so frustrating because you've got two of the best guards in basketball on the same team. Like it should be beautiful to watch. And I think you started to see that, the first quarter of the game, I think it was still, they're still trying to get some of the kinks out, it felt. But, I think as the game progressed, and especially into the fourth quarter, you started to see Luka setting screens for Kyrie setting screens for Luka, getting them matched up on different defenders that they kind of wanted to attack. And especially down, I can't remember when exactly in the fourth quarter, but there was that play where Kyrie set a screen for Luka. Luka had the ball and basically got double teamed and kicked it to Kyrie in the corner for the three. And it was like, that was like the perfect situation, the perfect play that could have happened. It's like the epitome of what should be going on every single night. These two players are on the floor. And, I think, we'll talk about the defense, but when you've got two guys like that in the fourth quarter, you have a chance in every game because you've got two guys that can take over. They both scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. It didn't feel like it was like, all right, your turn, my turn, right? It was kind of like, who's got the hot hand? Like Luka obviously was on fire there, throughout the game. So I think Kyrie kind of took a little bit of a backseat, and his shooting was a little bit off, granted as well. So it's nice to see, especially from a guy like Kyrie saying, kind of ceding that and saying, all right, man, like you take over, right? He's played with, we've for all the criticism that Kyrie Irving gets, we forget that he's played with ball dominant guys like LeBron. He's played with Kevin Durant. He's played with James Harden. So he's got that experience. And I think for Luka, that's also a learning experience. And we've heard from him saying, Kyrie and I have had these conversations of, some days it's going to be yours, some days it's going to be mine. It's whoever's the hot hand. And like, I'll play more off ball like I've done at Real Madrid. Like, I think Luka's comfortable with that. We just haven't seen it yet because he hasn't had somebody like Kyrie Irving next to him. So the fourth quarter was great. The Mavs came out victorious, right? I mean, the first quarter obviously was a travesty, but I think you started to kind of see what this team can be, and especially how Luka and Kyrie can kind of pair together at the end of games.
Yeah, I think you said it best with, who's hot. Yeah, I think that's last season you saw, okay, how do we play together? But this, like you said, it's the first game, but what you saw in that first game was who has it going, and that's the beauty of it. Just it was ever flowing within their offense, and you saw just a little glimpse of hope, that they do work well together, and not only do they work well together, they will dominate you on the offensive end. So it's hard to pick your battles because you have those two prolific scorers, and then guess what? You have 3-point shooters around them, or a rim running big and Lively. So they have so many options. The offense is going to be solid. And just what you saw with Kyrie and Luka in the fourth quarter, you said it. They both had 10 points. Grant Williams had 8, and Lively had 2. So those are the 4 guys, maybe Josh Green, that you want to see scoring in those moments. And the beauty of it is Luka and Kyrie are having conversations. And I think when you look back and you look at some of the guys that he's played with, Kristaps Porzingis, when he left Dallas, Kristaps said it himself that they didn't have those conversations. Mm-hmm. And that's where you're seeing the leadership of Luka Dončić on this team, and Kyrie Irving as well, as a duo working together, not only playing together, but working together on how they're going to get to their spots. What do each player like? And if you got it going, keep shooting. If you don't got it going, I'm going to step up and I'm going to keep shooting. So they're both prolific scorers, and I thought it was really good to see them play well together.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really interesting point with respect to Luka's leadership, right? Like that's kind of been, I don't want to say a knock on him, right? But it's kind of like, when is he going to step into that role, right? Like he came into the league super young. He's it feels like the last few years it's been like Dwight Powell's kind of the de facto leader, right? Dorian was obviously extremely vocal when he was on the teams. Dinwiddie was extremely vocal on the team last year before he got traded. Kyrie's never been kind of that guy, right? Throughout his career, he's never really been, the most vocal guy. And I think we've all wanted to see Luka kind of take that responsibility on, as great as he is, being the face of the franchise. And I think you saw glimpses of that as well, right? Like you said, you saw kind of the communication between Luka and Kyrie. I think maybe at the beginning of the game there was a missed foul call, or Luka thought it was a missed foul call and he kind of got chirpy with the refs. I didn't see anything after that. Like there was, I saw him get back on defense. I saw him, there was no complaining to the refs. There was no, arguing. There was no throwing his hands up and kind of waiting, at the other side of the court. The part that really captured that for me was even when it was coming out of into a timeout. I think when Grant Williams kind of started getting chirpy with the refs, and Luka went over to him and said, "Let's get in the huddle. Like let's get back. Like let's figure out what we're going to do next." That's, we talk about progressions and we talk about the growth of this team. That's exactly what you want to see if you're a Mavericks fan.
Yeah, it really is, because it's just showing you the development and the maturity from Luka. And it's nice to hear him say those things, but when you actually see it in games, because we've asked him, we've seen him say it many times, he's working on it, he knows he's chirpy with the refs, and just like you pointed out, not only with the refs, he's showing leadership with his teammates. And that's just a beautiful thing to see from a 24-year-old who's finally learning how to not only dominate on the court, but dominate off the court by, showing that leadership, showing them around when they're overseas, in the first game, like you said, when actually another player like Grant is getting chirpy with the refs, which we've seen thousands of times with Luka doing with the refs. It's the opposite. He's pulling. He said, "Grant, come on, let's go. Don't worry about it." And I didn't even think about that. And that's a great point that you brought up with him being chirpy with the refs, because last season, even after the Kyrie trade, I mean, it still was, a repetitive thing that we saw. with Luka, and then there were so many 5-on-4 possessions and so many 5-on-4 fast breaks that ultimately led to Mavs losing when you look at the numbers, because they had a lot of close games that were within, 5-7 points. So it's something that we need to keep track on. Like you said, it's game one.
Yep.
But let's talk about that defense real quick. Let's talk about that defense. It was horrible in the first quarter. And I mean, what the Spurs put up 43 points, but I did like what I saw in the last three quarters. They outscored the Spurs 90-76. So that does give you hope that they are, locking in when they have the right lineups. But just that first quarter was putrid. But also the Spurs were making a lot of shots too.
Yeah, it felt like, I think I tweeted out, I think they hit like 63% of their shots in the first quarter, or something ridiculous. Like Devin Vassell went nuts, who I really like, by the way. I think he's awesome.
I know. He's
Super
really
underrated.
good. Yes.
Great player. I think
He got paid too. Get the
yeah,
bag.
he did. He did. Yeah, I got the bag. I think it's a combination of a couple things, right? I think one, with the hype surrounding Wemby, this being kind of, that first game, I think everybody on that Spurs team was like super hyped up, and I think there was a level of aggressiveness there from them, and it just
Yeah.
felt like everything was going down, right? And I think if for the Mavericks, like they played, I felt like on-ball defense was pretty good in the first half. They were just hitting everything. Like it was kind of frustrating to watch, actually.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned it earlier, the kind of 5-on-4s that the Mavericks got stuck in last year. It felt like, especially in the first quarter, that's kind of how San Antonio was scoring, because it was a lot of missed shots by Dallas, and it was in transition on the fast break, off of long rebounds, that San Antonio was getting a lot of their points. So I think that stuff, as the season progresses, will get cleaned up. And I think Maxey just looked slow. Like he couldn't stay in front of his defender. Like he just looked off the entire game. I mean, he knocked down a couple good shots. I think we were all surprised to see him in the starting lineup. Derrick Jones Jr. was kind of like, okay, it made sense, schematically, I think, in terms of like his length and going up against Wemby. But I think seeing Maxey was a surprise, and I think you saw that Maxey should not start ever again. Coming off the bench is fine, but he looked awful in that first quarter, and I think a lot of that poor defense was attributed to him as well.
You said it. It was definitely a shocker, and Coach Kidd did mention, we have to point it out, that he started Maxey to, for a defensive approach. Obviously, he was guarding Wemby, and then also to keep Lively out of foul trouble. First game, first jitters, he could get a couple fouls, and then that sets the tone differently for him. But
which makes
at
sense.
the same time,
we talked about that last week, right? Like that's exactly
what we
predicted.
But he, on defense, it was horrible, and that's what Maxey is known for, to be a defender and knock down threes, and he's just lost the step. I mean, let's be honest, but hopefully he gets better at it, so we can see the normal Maxey that we are accustomed to. But he just lost the step from last year. I know he was having little injuries over the season, over the summer, but it is just not the normal Maxey. And the preseason was bad, and we saw it in the first game. It was bad as well. At least he did make a couple threes, but on offense, he wasn't really there either. I mean, outside of those those threes, he really wasn't there. So, I mean, it's going to be very interesting who plays tonight. But before we get to tonight, let's talk about Grant Williams. What was your thoughts on Grant Williams?
I loved it. I think it was as great of a debut as you could have had. And if it wasn't for Dereck Lively, who we'll talk about, I think that would have been the story, in terms of, Mavericks debut. I mean, 17 points. He hit some big shots, played his role perfectly, right? Like, was cut into the basket, the I remember there was a Tim Hardaway pass, after he bricked a three, got the rebound and passed it right back to Grant for a layup. Was right in his spots, in the corner where he needed to be. Played really, really well off ball with Luka, Kyrie. You saw, we talked about his chirpiness, kind of his grit. You kind of saw that come out a little bit on defense. Defensively, I thought he played outstanding. I thought he was great. It's hard in a game like that when you're going up against Wemby, but I feel like they tried to switch on to Grant a lot, just him being smaller, than Dereck Lively and even seems like Maxey as well. But he held his own, I think. Got a couple
Yeah.
fouls called. I think it was as good of a debut as you could have asked for, and it's exactly why that he was, the number one target for this team going into the offseason. I think Nico and the coaching staff kind of figured, looking at a guy like that, that's exactly the type of player that Luka and Kyrie need next to them, is a solid 3-and-D wing defender, guy who can knock down his shots when his number's called and, do the dirty work, right? Like, defend the opponent's best player and get those offensive boards and things like that. I mean, and he's the way he was setting screens, also kind of open, freeing up Kyrie and Luka kind of around the court. I mean, I thought it was just fantastic. I loved the signing at the time, and I'm loving it even more, even though it's one game in.
Yeah, and to be honest, I was kind of worried about him after preseason. I mean, I was like, this kind of is not looking all right. But I mean, the defense was solid, but it looked out of form where he was in the offense. And then you see the first game, it's just totally different. Like you said, it's totally different. He looks perfect for the system, and the versatility of him on defense has always been there. He can guard 1 through 5. Really, he has the ability to do that, and just the offense, just the scoring impact, and he's not bad around the rim for his size. I mean, obviously, he's shorter than a lot of posts, but he can get up there with a lot of the bigger guys on the opposite end, and just his shooting. Shoot every single shot that you're open, because that dude has a laser. I mean, it's like Davis Bertans when he's hot. Like, he can shoot the ball.
Yeah,
like
really
shoot
can.
every single shot that you're open. He had 8 attempts and he made 4. And I think he's going to be probably within the top 6, 7 shooters this season, just going off of percentage, because his shot is beautiful. And not only when he's open, he's going to get a lot of open shots with Kyrie and Luka, but just when guys are contesting, he knows how to get it off, and it's a lot of times nothing but net. So that was good to see as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's an interesting
17 points.
Yeah, I mean, 17 from a guy that averaged 8 last year. Like, that's awesome. That's a phenomenal debut.
Do you see him making a run? I know it's one game, but do you see him making a run for most improved?
I mean, he could, right? Like,
Do you think that usually goes to All-Stars like they always do?
Yeah, I think it's gonna go to some, watch them give it to like John Morant or something when he comes back in January. Like, it wouldn't be surprising. The NBA awards are ridiculous, but I don't know if 17 a game is sustainable, but dude, if he's 12, 13, 15, like, that's perfect. Like, that's all he needs. That's all he needs to do. Like,
compared to last year.
Yeah, that's it. And I think the best thing about him is he knows his role. Like, he's not fighting for the ball. He's not asking for, I need 20 shots a game.
Yeah.
Like, he knows, all right, Luka, Kyrie are going to do their thing, but if I'm open, they're going to give me the ball.
In his rebounding, he had 6 rebounds. So if he could stay around there, 6, 7 rebounds, that would be great within that lineup. It's a small lineup.
Yeah.
If they keep Maxey in there, we'll see tonight. But just the rebounding within itself is good to see. So let's just transition. Speaking of rebounding,
oh boy,
let's transition to Dereck Lively. Man, I mean, okay. So first of all, let's backtrack. So let's be honest here. This is the season opener, but it was all about Wemby. Yeah. I mean, you had Luka Dončić, as it should be, but you had Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving on the Mavericks, but they went to San Antonio to start off the season, and it, like you said, as it should be, it's the hype around Wemby, which is well deserved. It's the biggest hype since LeBron James. So just the surrounding aspects of that within itself is, is magnified. It's on national television. Lively didn't get the start. So, everyone was wondering how's Lively going to do coming off the bench, and how's he going to do against Wemby? How's he going to do against Zach Collins, whoever he's playing against? And, it's the first game for him, and no one really even talked about him until the starting lineups were announced. So what was your thoughts when you saw his rookie debut for the Dallas Mavericks?
If it wasn't for, like I said, if it wasn't for him, Grant would have been the story. But boy, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be that good. Like, you're talking about a guy that never scored more than 11 at Duke, in his entire freshman year, and comes in here and just goes nuts. And missed one shot like the entire game, a double-double. Like you saw, I think and I went back and watched highlights, and I think you saw a little bit as to why Kidd didn't start him, because a lot of his problems at Duke and even in the preseason, the foul trouble, we saw it in the summer league as well, right? He got into a lot of foul trouble when people were driving to the rim. And I think he wants to excel as a shot blocker, right? Which is, I think that's going to come with time, but especially in the summer league and in preseason, we saw him, that's kind of where he got in trouble, is he was hitting people in the arms as they were going up for shots. And in this game, if you go back and look, you're seeing him really just kind of put his hands up vertically as opposed to trying to swat the ball. So he's not getting, not going to get called for those fouls. So I think when you go back and think of it that way, and you kind of look at the way he played, I kind of understand why Kidd didn't start him. But man, coming off the bench and doing what he did, catching lobs, offensive rebounding, playing in the low post, like, he's not going to post up anybody. He's going to be exactly what Tyson Chandler was for this team. That's it's silly to say that that's the comp, but like, it's literally what it looks like. It's a carbon copy of it, and he's got him helping him and coaching him, right? So it's kind of the glove fits, and the most impressive play was, for me, was off the Tim Hardaway miss, where he set the screen. Hardaway took that shot and he rolled to the rim as Hardaway was shooting it. I don't know if he knew Hardaway was going to miss it like we all did, but he rolled right to the rim, and that thing came off the rim, and he put it back in. Like, that was incredible.
Yeah,
that's not
nice.
A rookie play, right? Like, that takes skill. That takes, like, smarts. Like, you have to understand basketball to be able to do something like that. So, I think it was phenomenal. This is if he's even half of what he was, on Wednesday night, like, Mavericks are going to be set. Like, and I think you started to hear, I think a lot of people were surprised, because you started to hear, even national broadcasters start talking about it, right? Like, you had, even in J.J. Redick was talking about it. Stephen A. Smith gave him props, which Stephen A. Smith never gives the Mavericks props. So it's kind of cool to hear. And it's, as a Mavericks fan, like, you have to be excited, because, like, that's what this team needed last year, is somebody who could do all the things Dereck Lively did. And he just showed you in one game off the bench what he can add to this team. And it was phenomenal. I think it was one of the best debuts for a Maverick ever.
Yeah, it was just amazing to see. Just going back to last season and what they were missing, and then you draft, you actually move down a couple spots too, and you still get some more additional pieces to your roster, but or just get off the Davis contract. But it's just beautiful to see you go and target someone, draft them, and he's what you want to see in that starting spot, or just not even that starting spot, just him as a rookie. It's exciting to see, because there's more things that you can talk about to his maturity, the things that he's been through, losing his father, and what his mom is fighting, or has fought for a long decade. But it's really beautiful to see him on the court and just show maturity and show a calmness to him, that it's like a vet like aura around him, and he's only 19. That's what's scary about it. Once he gets some more weight, and once he figures out game type experiences on what to do, not to do, watch film, over these next couple of years, like, it could be really scary on what he can do for this team. But just right now in game one, it was beautiful to see. It was just so astonishing that, that is the weakness of this team, and a rookie is stepping in to fill it. And if he starts or if he comes off the bench, he played 30 minutes. I mean, that's what's crazy to me. He played 30 minutes. We talked about it on the pod. We were thinking he was gonna play what 15
12,
at the
15,
most. I
yeah.
mean, yeah,
And
in the
that's why I
Dwight
don't.
Powell role last year.
Yeah, and that's why like starting lineups, like they are what they are, right? What's your closing lineup? That's more important. And he was right there. I mean, fourth
Yeah.
quarter, like he was the one, helping that last sequence of defense for Dallas. The last like 3 minutes was unbelievable, and he kind of spearheaded that.
But there is the other side too, because I know it's who closes. That is the most important, and he does play starters minutes, but
Mhm.
I would like to see them have a better start, because when
True.
you're digging yourself in those holes, it does hurt you for those games. So I'm really looking to see how they start tonight. Well, who's the starter? But how you can't get in those holes in the first quarter, because if they didn't get in that hole, they would have blew the Spurs out by like 20.
Yeah,
So
and you make. I mean, you're right. Like this team has a problem starting games
it
slow.
happened last year.
We saw last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's got to improve. And hopefully it does. I kind of I understand Mavericks gave up 43 points in the first quarter, but Landon, we've talked about adjustments and Jason Kidd's adjustments so much, and I think we saw that,
Yeah.
right? Like you mentioned
You
it, we
think that was
outscored.
because the mic and the camera was on him?
Yeah. He
That was looking like that Phoenix series. I mean, when he
I
had that mic and camera
I
on
don't
him.
know why they did that. It was so dumb. Like I don't understand that.
I hate that.
So
I hate
stupid.
that.
Like
You don't need to hear everything
and he was being quiet on purpose. Like he's like, I'm not giving away. Thank God.
on purpose.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last year, he would have like been telling everybody what our plays were, and I mean, thank God he was quiet. But I think you started to see some of those adjustments, right? He's called timeouts earlier,
Mhm.
right? Called them at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
You know, Derrick Jones Jr. and who kind of took him out of the game and let Hardaway and Green kind of cover that 3 spot. And even second, third, fourth quarter, like as you said, like the defense got better. Like the Mavericks only gave up 70 something points, in the last 3
Yeah.
quarters. So, I think you started to kind of see that again. It's game 1. Like, let's see what happens, over the course of the next few months. But that's an encouraging sign. Like, even though this team started slow, like they were still able to kind of, they're only down 9. Like it was like second quarter started and it could have been a lot worse, right? They could have been down 15, 16
Yeah.
by middle of the third quarter, but they made adjustments, they clawed their way back, and then then it was neck and neck. It felt like from the third quarter on, and they made enough stops in the fourth quarter to pull out the win.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see just over the course of time how they develop, how this team develops. I think you said you always like to see where they're at in December, on how the defense is playing out, how the offense starts, and how they finish as well. Just watching it from Lively, Grant, and then Kyrie and Luka, it's something promising to see. And it's also the thing that I took out of that game. I mean, you mentioned it, Lively and Grant, but the thing that I took out was Luka, his willingness to give up his usage, and it's just very shocking, but not shocking at the same time,
Right.
because you have a player who has the ability of Kyrie Irving. You have to, if you want to have a successful duo. But just from what you've seen in the past few years to what you're seeing now is really something there. There's something there that you can see Luka, and you mentioned it, and Luka's mentioned it, the Real Madrid, where you're sharing duties, and they had those conversations. So it just goes back to the leadership between Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving to lead this team, but also not because they have to, because they want to. That's the thing that's very eye-opening, because they really want to work together to make this team work, and make this team work right now. Because Luka gave up the ball a lot to Kyrie Irving, and we saw a little bit of it last year, but it was because they kind of had to. They were
Yeah.
learning each other. But now it's like we have a plan. When this happens, you get the ball, you push it up. And when this happens, I get the ball. And not only that is the pace. The pace was phenomenal.
Yes.
I want to see that pace stay. It makes the Mavs more watchable, but it also just it just makes the flow just so much better. What do you think about the pace from the first game?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, this was one of, if not the slowest team in basketball last year, right? Like, I understand the half
Yeah,
court offense, and that's where Luka excels. But
because yeah,
even he
makes
talked about
sense.
it, right? Like, like they want to get out and run a little bit more. Like he's comfortable with that, and I think
Yeah,
when your best player wants to do that and is comfortable with it, you do it, right? And then we've said it a lot. Like a lot of NBA teams, like those are easy points when you're running out in transition normally, right? Like if you've got guys that can cut in and especially off long rebounds, like we talked about, you can get a lot of 5-on-4, like 4-on-3 scenarios there, right? Like those are easy
yeah,
points, especially for a team that's as offensively skilled as Dallas is. So, um, I think the pace is great. They've got to keep it up. And you mentioned something interesting, Landon, that, you could kind of see Luka, the trust now he has in Kyrie. I mean, look at the trust he has in Dereck Lively already,
mhm,
right? Like I mean, he gave him, so many props like
yeah.
after
You
the
see
game.
some of
And
those passes?
yeah, those were unbelievable. Like
Oh,
that's like the
yeah, it's
fact
like
that,
Brandon Wright
yeah.
type lob.
The fact that like they've already built this chemistry like over the course of training camp is awesome to see, because we all remember the stare down of Jason Kidd when JaVale McGee was in the game last year, right at the beginning of the year, and this just seemed like the complete opposite. And it finally looked like for the first time in a long time that Luka was having fun and like enjoying playing with his teammates. Like you saw him do the shimmy after hitting the three, and you saw a bunch of smiles, and the leadership's coming out. That's what you want. Like you want him to be happy. That's what the Mavs need to do, is keep your star player happy, right? Like what did Milwaukee do with Giannis, right? Like you
Yeah,
keep him happy, and hopefully that leads to another extension. So this is kind of the start of the second phase of Luka's career, where all right, the first this was the first part. We got to the conference finals. You lose a guy like Brunson. Now you realize, all right, we've got to revamp this roster for what? How do we put the right pieces around Luka now? And kind of get off some of these bad contracts that we've got. And this is kind of the second part of that, that tear down. And now you're starting to see, what that looks like.
yeah. I've said it. I think it's a progress year, but I I think that progress year could be good.
Yep.
If they show the ability to sustain those last 3 quarters of defense and just what we saw from the players that we mentioned in this podcast. Obviously, that was a great first game. Um, Stats are high, but just when it levels out, when you have a good sample size, you would like to see some consistency. So let's talk about the last um, topic of this episode is tonight. Can we call it the Dorian Finney-Smith homecoming game?
Dodo homecoming. I love it.
Oops, sorry, Dinwiddie. Oh. But Dinwiddie too. He was here for a short time, but
Yeah.
Dorian Finney-Smith, everyone loves Dorian. And it's also on the flip side, Kyrie's first time playing Brooklyn.
Yep.
So I know he said it post practice. There's no, chaos or there's no, back and forth with the organization. It was just some disagreements, and he felt it was best in his career to move on to another team. I kind of like how no one talks about Kevin Durant doing the same thing, but
Yeah.
they always talk about Kyrie doing the same thing. But just what are you looking forward to the most from tonight's game in the home opener?
Yeah, it's a lot of storylines, right? It's Jason Kidd against Brooklyn once again. Dennis Smith
Oh yeah,
Jr. makes his return to Dallas.
oh yeah,
Dinwiddie,
yeah.
Dodo, obviously Kyrie and Seth, former Nets players. Like, there's a lot of cool, like,
So many.
little storylines behind it. But look, this is a game that the Mavericks should win pretty easily,
Yeah.
right? Like
And Claxton's out. Nick
yeah, and
Claxton's
Nick
out.
Claxton's out. They're starting Daron Sharp, which I'm hoping for another big game, from Dereck Lively if he's going to be in the starting lineup. I mean, we'll see, or even off the bench. Like take advantage of the fact that their best defender, or their second best defender, I guess, is out, because I would still put Mikal Bridges as their best defender. But this
Ben
is
Simmons is good too.
Yeah, that's true. And Ben Simmons, obviously. This is a game. Look, the Mavericks should win this, right? This should be a pretty simple, an easy win for them. So I want to see them take advantage of it, right? Like we saw too many times last year, Mavericks playing down to their competition, right? Like, games that they should have easily won. Didn't they lose to like Detroit twice? Like it's like some games that it was just like, what are you doing? Like you got to get better.
Yeah.
The Killian Hayes game last year where he just ate the Mavericks alive. Like this needs to be like, they need to put their foot down and step on the gas and do what great NBA teams do, and that's beat the teams you're supposed to beat, right? Like get out ahead, because guess what? You've got to play Memphis next week. Got to play the Clippers next week. Like it doesn't get easier, right? So this is a game where you can put your mark on it. You can do what you're supposed to do and just win the game. And I understand the emotions are going to be high for both teams, because it's there's a lot of familiar faces that are going to be playing against each other. But at the end of the day, the Mavericks are the better team. And the Nets aren't bad. Like let's give them credit. Like what they did. After getting rid of Kyrie and Harden and Durant, like they still made the playoffs last year. Like they've got a good roster. They're just super young, and so the Mavericks are relatively a veteran team, and they need to play like it tonight.
Yeah, and it's the home opener. I feel like the Mavericks are going to come out and give the crowd a show. I mean, let's think about last season in their home opener. They played the Grizzlies and they won 137-96.
Yep.
So I mean, and they're 26-17 in home openers for the franchise history. But what I'm really looking forward to is just seeing the second game of Dereck Lively, obviously after what we saw in the first game, but just seeing the chemistry with Luka and Kyrie keep developing and keep going up, because it's really good to see when they're both clicking and they both have a plan and they both want each other to succeed so the team succeeds. But I gotta give Dorian Finney-Smith a shout out. I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith, that's our boy.
I think every Mavs fan loves Dorian. Like there's just unconditional love there for
He'll be back one day. He'll be back.
I hope so.
I believe it.
So. I would love to see him retire in a Mavs jersey. Like that would be awesome. And he was the heart, maybe not the heart and soul of this team, but he was, just a great compliment to Luka, just a great guy. Like, everyone loved him, hard worker. I mean, the trajectory of his career, like he could have, wallowed out and just, been one of those guys that bounces back and forth between the G League. But man, he put in the work. He got the bag. He played great for this team. I mean, it's unfortunate that he had to be a part of that deal, but man, he'll always be loved by Mavs fans. I know that.
I mean, if you're gonna get traded, it's not like it's for a draft pick or it's for Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
So that's something that you can look at, and then also, like you just mentioned, they gave him the bag before he left.
Yep.
And he still lives here. I mean, he was at a Dallas Wings game with Mark Cuban. Have you ever seen an owner trade someone and go to a sporting event with them? I mean, that's love. That's where you still intertwined, So he's still in the mix. I've never seen that, by the way.
That's awesome.
But, I mean, they live here, so it was something to do. And he brought his daughter, so that's something that I look forward to. Just seeing the crowd, just cherish him being back, and hopefully they have a highlight. I'm sure they'll have a video package and all that stuff. And I kind of hope that they don't do it together. Just do it singled out. Have Dinwiddie first, and then have Dorian.
Yeah.
But if they do Dinwiddie and Dorian, it kind of just just a little bit filters out what that big roar for Dorian.
Yeah.
So
and Dinwiddie was great here too. Like let's not discount.
He was
awesome.
He was a big piece for the Western Conference run.
Yeah, he really was.
Dorian.
I know Dorian's
he was like the rebuild. Just his story. Like he made the last spot He was undrafted. He made the last spot on the Mavericks team, and he worked his way. He couldn't shoot. He was a defender, and then he developed a shot. And then he was one of the big rotation pieces. Then he had to start games because injuries and they're trying to get high picks. But then he played so good, and his shot was so good. So and now they have Grant Williams, who's like a younger version of him. He's only 24, so it's gonna be a great night. But this is gonna be a great night in all of Dallas Fort Worth.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be crazy.
So Shahnavaz, let's see. Last words. What do you think the score will be for tonight's game?
Which game are we talking about?
The Mavericks and the Rangers.
There we go. All right, I'm gonna say Dallas. I'm gonna say Dallas Mavericks win 115-102.
Okay. I like you give that prediction.
I think that's feels like because look, this team's gonna put up points, right? Like it's just they're gonna score over 110. It feels like every night, seemingly. So why not put them a little bit over that? I think you see a little bit. Hopefully a different rotation this game, and we don't have the starting lineups yet, while we're recording this. So I'm interested to see what Kid does, and does Seth play more? He played 4 minutes on Wednesday. Like, does Seth get more minutes? Are we gonna, is Jaden Hardy gonna be available for tonight? Are we gonna see Omax for the first time? Rashawn Holmes? Like, there's a lot of different kind of pieces, to kind of play with. So it'll be interesting. But I think the Mavericks win 115-102, and I say the Rangers win 7-5.
Ooh. Hey, you heard it first from Shahnavaz. So make sure you write it down what he said. If he gets it right.
Ooh boy.
Yeah. It's scary. All right. Thanks, everyone.